You are a superhero, cabrón.
Y'all take shots, y'all aim up. Whoa!
You're the Blue Beetle.
Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of DCU Daily. We've got lots to get through today. There's a lot going on in the world of the DCU, the DCEU, just general DC and superhero world. So, I figured we'd throw it all together in one big, go, and let's give it a shot. Let's talk about all of the news that's been coming out lately in the world of the DCU, and as well as even Marvel. I think we're going to get into a little bit of Marvel as well. So let me start off by, let's start off with a story that I'm sure you guys may have, already heard about, or if you haven't, then let me bring it to you. So, Blue Beetle, its projections have doubled. Now, this is for the opening weekend box office. We talked about this on DCU Daily a short while ago. We talked about how DCU's next movie, or actually DCEU's next movie, and what would be, according to James Gunn, the first character in the DCU, Blue Beetle, it wasn't really tracking well at the domestic box office for opening weekend. Now, DC movies recently have not been doing very well. That's totally not a secret whatsoever. But if you look at the trailer for this movie, it's pretty solid. Like, this movie is looking like it's going to perform quite well with the Latino audiences. It's really the first Latino superhero in the DC movie world, and really largely across most mainstream comic book movies. I don't believe you can really look at a lot of Marvel or DC or Sony Marvel or even the X-Men. There's not a lot of, if any, superhero movies that I've seen come out before where the main hero and just the focus of the movie wasn't on the Latino community. And so I really think that that's a big part of where the audience is hopefully going to come from for this film, because you got to come out and support your people. I love Miss Marvel because she's a Pakistani American teenager, and that's similar to my background. So I loved going to watch her TV show on Disney Plus. Every week was coming out. I'm looking forward to The Marvels. So yeah, let's talk about Blue Beetle at the box office. About a month ago, the initial long-range projections came out, and those numbers weren't very good. Like, you look at those numbers there. These are from Box Office Pro, and they were projecting Blue Beetle to start off with $12 to $17 million in its opening weekend, and then finishing out at like 27 to 55 million total. Now you look at those numbers, and then you think about, okay, so the budget for this movie. Initially, this movie was conceived as a streaming movie for HBO Max, which now is known as Max. But they decided pretty early on that this thing was looking very good, so they turned it into a theatrical release, and then Walter Hamada was still in charge at DC. So, this is a legacy project that James Gunn and Peter Safran's regime has inherited, but it's a project that, is certainly very different from any other DC project we have seen in recent years. Nonetheless, it's a movie that's got a budget of around 120 million. 120 million isn't exactly terrible. It's also not cheap, Like, Joker's budget was like around 80 million. The first, Joker, not Joker Folie de, I think its budget is like double what the original. I think it's closer to 150. The original one had a budget of 80, and even then Warner Brothers only financed half of that. They brought in some external financing partners for the other half, and so, that movie, when it made $1 billion, was like money in the bank. Like, almost like everything past the first couple of $100 million was just gravy. So with a movie like this at $120 million, it's got a budget that's close to what Shazam did, Fury of the Gods. But its budget is a lot lower than movies like Black Adam and The Flash, which were closer to 200 million or higher. And then when you look at the marketing spend on this movie, because of the actor strike, we really are not seeing a ton of actor and director, the people in the movie are not really there promoting this film as it comes out. There's no red carpet premiere. Xolo Mariduena is not on social media, hyping this movie up because of the strike. And, and that's something that I'd say that good on them. They're standing by their union, and that's fine. They did do some interviews before the strike that were, obviously done months in advance, and now we will get to see more and more of those come out. But when it comes down to, active promotion, especially a red carpet premiere, and, usually red carpet premiere quotes that go viral, like whether it's James Gunn lets out some new piece of information, or Xolo Mariduena or the director of the movie might let out, like, oh, we got a sequel in plan, like something like that. That's not going to be happening. So that is unfortunate, and part of that lacking promotion is going to hurt, I think, the movie's box office potential, but that also means that Warner Brothers is spending less in marketing. They're spending around $50 million, let's say, roughly on marketing. So you look at a $120 million budget, another $50 million, you add that together, that's about $170 million that they're spending on this movie. So when you look at the amount of money that movie theaters take, and then, what the studios walk away with, it breaks out to somewhere between, it varies by literally, studio to studio and movie to movie almost, but it breaks up into roughly 30 to 40% of the take at the box office goes towards the movie theaters, and then the rest of the, let's say, the 60 to 70% movie theaters walk away with, not movie theaters, studios walk away with. And so if you look at the numbers here, with 170 million that being spent on this movie, it needs to make somewhere north of 250 million to be profitable. And The Flash, which started off with about a $50 million opening weekend at domestic box office, finished its global run at like 260 million, 265, somewhere in that range. It didn't hit 270, which is pretty terrible for a movie that was made for around 200 million plus the marketing. Despite the fact that they, had a underwhelming marketing campaign because they couldn't really showcase Ezra Miller for reasons that you're probably already aware. But having said that, this movie now with an opening that is being projected at $30 million, and this is domestic. Now we may get more, good news internationally. It may play even better internationally. Certainly franchises like Fast and Furious movies, where you have this cast that is incredibly diverse. It's a franchise that's, based on things like family, close family values and things of that nature, which plays really, really well across the globe, those kind of themes. That franchise, it's sort of been tailing off in the US and the North American market, but it's still running super strong internationally. And that really drove Fast X's box office, despite the fact that in the US and Canada, it really didn't do all that well. Certainly not as well as they would have wanted it to. So I do believe that when you look at how those movies have performed internationally, and how thematically this movie is very similar. Jaime Reyes, he's very close with his family. You can see in the trailers that the family aspect of all of this is a big deal. And it's a fantastic part of the movie, which I really enjoy watching in the trailers, that, he's got a sister, he's got his uncle, he's got the parents, and his grandma, like they're all part of, Team Blue Beetle, which, these recent DC project have a bit of a theme that, it's not just the hero, it's everybody around the hero that matters. So I really do enjoy that aspect of this movie already. Despite not having seen the movie itself, the trailers itself make it pretty clear that this movie is going to have, like, family is going to be a big part of the movie's, ethos. So I do believe for those reasons, this movie will perform quite well internationally. But domestically, with a $30 million opening weekend, I think this is all great news. You look at this article on Deadline, and they kind of break it down. They say, look, this is not just performing well amongst, audiences who are asked, hey, are you looking forward to these movies, movie A, movie B, movie C? But it's performing really well with audiences who were just asked, what movie are you looking forward to? And they're saying Blue Beetle, without being told or given some options to pick from. So I really do love that, this movie is performing so well with audiences out there. And I can't wait to, go out and check this out in the movie theater, go see it multiple times. It's really a movie that's picked up a lot of hype with the Latino audiences, and I think that will help drive its success. And in addition to that, I do believe the international box office will do really, really well for this movie. I don't know if this thing is gonna get anywhere close to 500 million. It doesn't need to be to break even and to be profitable, but if it can get anywhere close to like the Flash numbers or somewhere north of that, not only will it be the highest grossing DC movie of the year, it would also probably set Jaime Reyes up to return in the new DCU under James Gunn and do a lot more Blue Beetle stuff, hopefully like more sequels. I think they've already teased like a trilogy, so I'm really looking forward to that. I will say this, if you guys are part of the Blue Beetle Battalion, let me know in the comments below. Do these numbers give you any sense of hope that, hey, this movie may not flop after all, that it has some hope? Let me know in the comments below. Of course, like and subscribe. It really helps us out with everything that we do here on the channel. And of course, if you guys want to hear more about Blue Beetle, just let me know in the comments, because Blue Beetle Battalion is going strong here at DCU Daily. Let's talk about Creature Commandos, right? It's the first project in the new DCU. James Gunn mentioned this when he did his whole presentation earlier this year, and we know now, and this has been confirmed by James Gunn on Threads, and this is something that I actually came across and I was like, oh wait, this is all already out there. So we know now that the first season of Creature Commandos is going to have 7 episodes. 7 episodes. It's going to be animated, where these characters, they're going to be voiced by actors who will probably make the jump to live action, and that's really one of the most exciting things that I can think of, the fact that these characters will be live action at some point in the future in the DCU. And of course, the story here is that this sort of a Creature Commandos are kind of like a Suicide Squad, like Amanda Waller puts them together. They're these like Frankenstein's monster, and you got Rick Flag's father, Rick Flag Sr., and you've got a bunch of other these fantastical characters who admittedly I think live action would be difficult to pull off, but like in an animated show, you have a lot more just freedom to kind of just roam and figure out what you want to do with these characters. And I really would love to see the animation style. Certainly right now that the style that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse really started has just taken a foot. Like every movie, even Pixar is trying to copy the style. In many ways, if you saw the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the Mutant Mayhem movie, that's trying to copy the style. So everybody's trying to do that, moving, painting, sort of artistic, comic book come to life style, not your traditional Pixar 3D animation. And even the recent DC animated projects have started to kind of veer away from your traditional DC animation style. Now, having said that, this show, we now know it has a 7-episode first season, and the fact that they keep calling it a first season, where James Gunn has written all the episodes himself, and he has basically, going to be producing the show, certainly one of the executive producers. He also confirmed to us that most of the voiceover work, like probably not all, but most of the voiceover work is already done, like before the actors went on strike, which is great, because that to me is fantastic news, because this is a show that's meant to come out next year in 2024. It's probably going to be the only DCU project next year, and then the year after we have Superman Legacy coming out, and Superman Legacy, of course, is meant to officially kick off the new DCU. So we will get, of course, Blue Beetle this year, which is meant to be like the first character in the DCU, but I guess the story of the movie may not be canon to the DCU, and it's technically part of the DCEU, so there's a little bit of confusion there. We'll see how that goes. But as far as just kicking off the new universe and having the first official project, or like at least one of the first official projects, because again, James Gunn keeps saying Superman Legacy will kick off the new DCU proper, but it looks like maybe Blue Beetle, the Jaime Reyes version from this year's movie, is going to come across in some way. And then, of course, you have Creature Commandos coming out next year, which I think is a bold way to launch a new franchise, a new cinematic universe with an animated project, and with the commitment to, like, take those characters into live action, kind of similar to what Star Wars is doing with, Star Wars Rebels and Clone War characters that are now coming out in live action in Ahsoka, and we have seen them in The Mandalorian. And when done right, it can be an absolutely wonderful time for the fans, as well as just for anybody who's not even familiar with the characters. You're seeing these fantastic designs from the animated world being translated to the live action scene. So I'm excited to see where Creature Commandos goes. I want to know, if you guys think this show is going to just be like a mini series, like a lot of Marvel shows are, where it's 7 episodes, one and done, or are they going to, come back and do more of these? There's certainly that Suicide Squad aspect to this whole situation where the team can keep evolving and changing, characters get killed off. It's another one of those, clandestine organizations or groups that are, Amanda Waller, the common thread there between Suicide Squad and Creature Commandos, and she's put together these people who they can just disavow if they get caught or if shit goes sideways. So I'm excited to see how this project plays out. I don't watch a lot of DC animated stuff lately because I just feel like, they were in their prime with Justice League and Justice League Unlimited and Batman Beyond. Oh my God, like, don't even get me started. The Batman, the original, the Batman, the animated series, probably one of the best animated TV shows of all time. So, I certainly have sort of been of the belief that DC animated has sort of been on a downhill trajectory of the last 5 years. So I'm excited to see now, under the new leadership with James Gunn and Peter Safran, can they turn things into, this more prestige animation, the kind of animation that we're seeing from Sony in the Spider-Verse, the kind of animation that, Pixar has been known for, and what, Disney animation has been known for decades, where not only are you, showing us something that looks fantastic visually and is the ultimate creative artistic expression, but also are fantastic stories. And unlike what we've even seen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, stories that will connect to the live action universe, and like what we have seen, I guess, in Star Wars, if I can see that in the DC universe, that would be fantastic. So I'm looking forward to it. Tell me what you guys think about this in the comments below. Of course, it's been a lot of fun just looking back at that presentation from James Gunn, and now seeing that this project has been coming along so quickly. And yeah, I mean, voiceover work isn't the biggest part of these projects, but it's certainly an important part, and I'm glad that they got a lot of the voiceover work done before the actor strike, because we don't know when that strike is going to end. But let me know in the comments below what you guys think, and if this is a project that you guys are looking forward to, because for one, I am most definitely looking forward to it. All right, so now let's move on to a different story. This is a story where let me how do I put this? Okay, so the Ayer cut, right? The Ayer cut is like the Snyder cut used to be, this almost mythical thing that some people say exists. I mean, David Ayer himself says that this is something that's real, that is out there. But my question to you would be this: have you heard the latest talk in the social sphere about the Ayer cut? And clicking on this video, you probably have heard about it. So it's a bit of a question that you don't have to answer. But I am still kind of skeptical. Skeptical. Wow, I'm really chewing up my words today. But yeah, I'm skeptical about this, right? Because David Ayer's cut of the Suicide Squad, we all know that it exists, but in what shape does it exist? That's the question, right? We know that when the Snyder Cut was a mythical object that sort of existed in some people's mind, and not, it was really, it was hard to tell if it was real or not, right? Like we saw the picture that Zack Snyder posted on social media of like, hey, look, I've got the reels and stuff, and like it's there. But really, like, did it mean that it was actually ready to go? No. Like the studio, Warner Brothers, had to spend like $70 million to get that cut ready to literally, put out on HBO Max and make that 4-hour movie. Not only that, it gave them like 30 to 50, I forget the exact number, millions of dollars, basically tens of millions of dollars, to go and do some additional filmography. And then really that added photography was what helped to stitch together the ultimate story that Zack Snyder wanted to tell. And there was a lot of VFX work that had to be done. So with the David Ayer cut of the Suicide Squad, the question becomes this, right? He recently said James Gunn has told him that the Ayer cut will have its time to be shared. Like, it would have its time to be shared, and when that happens, we don't know. Now, basically around the same time that he said this on his Twitter, everybody goes crazy with the headlines and starts talking about like, oh my God, James Gunn said that the Ayer cut is going to be a thing, that is going to happen. And then people like, playing this game of telephone took the next step and said, oh, not only is it going to happen, it's going to happen in 2024 before James Gunn launches his new DCU with Superman Legacy, which now we're going to have Creature Commandos next year, but the big official launch, the cinematic launch of the DCU is with Superman Legacy in 2025. So it started to just become like this whole social media storm, which I'm sure if you've been online the last few days and been following DC news, you're well aware of that. So as part of that, and I think where this rumor kind of started is because as part of the Ayer saying what he said about the Ayer cut in one of his recent Twitter posts, is he said that, look, James Gunn deserves to launch his new shared universe without any baggage from the past. So I think people took that to mean that, oh, the Ayer cut is going to get released before Superman Legacy, and since Superman Legacy is coming out in 2025, that must mean that Ayer cut is coming out in 2024. So that's where this comes from. Now, I still wonder though if that is actually true, and I think David Ayer is probably going to support me on this, because when he was asked by one of the accounts on Twitter, the account that goes by the name of The Ayer Cut or @CutAyer, and is basically all about the Ayer cut of the Suicide Squad, which, by the way, the theatrical version of the Suicide Squad movie from David Ayer, I really loved it. I thought it was a lot of fun. I actually will probably do a video in the future where I talk about how I prefer that version of the Suicide Squad. I actually prefer the extended version that they put out on Blu-ray later. But like, I like that movie better than the Suicide Squad, and that part of it has to do with like what they did with Rick Flag in the second movie, but also just Will Smith and Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn, which was a breakout hit of a character. The movie made like $700 million, like at the box office. Like, people keep looking at the score and say like, oh my God, the movie was so trash, and it's like cool to hate on a film, but I'm like, okay, great. Rotten Tomatoes scores were definitely ugly on both the audience and the critic side. But when you go back and you look at the numbers that movie made at the box office, those were more than respectable. That movie was very profitable for the studio at Warner Brothers. So look, ultimately, getting back to this whole David Ayer situation, he, debunked the rumor when the Ayer cut Twitter account asked him, like, "Hey man, what's going on with this Ayer cut? Are you saying it's going to come out in 2024?" David Ayer went and said, "Oh, silly rumor, not true. It ain't happening." And to me, that's just like, okay. So in one set of words, you said that it's going to have its time, and James Gunn deserves to launch his universe without any kind of baggage hanging around from past projects. And then you're saying, okay, well, there's no, truthfulness, at least as of yet, to the idea that the Ayer cut will come out in 2024. So logic would tell you that either when he made those comments about James Gunn telling him that Ayer cut will have its, day in the sun, if you will, or it's time to be shared, in his own words, he was probably speculating a little bit regarding like the timing of it. And I think he implied a lot more than maybe he should have. And of course, the internet being the internet takes everything too far. I personally will tell you this. Even though James Gunn said that this will happen, I really don't think this is going to be happening anytime soon, because there's already so much for the new DC studios to focus on that I would really looking back at even the Suicide Squad. There's a lot of baggage attached to the old DCU in general. Whether it's a good movie or a bad movie, they just seem to, of late, no matter what they do, they can't get a hit, And the Suicide Squad came out at a time when the pandemic was really just destroying every movie in sight. Nobody was going to the movie theater for health safety purposes, and all the reasons why, one of the why they decided to release it on HBO Max at the same time, which some people might say hurt it more than it helped it, and that's fair. But ultimately, it's difficult for me to tell you that the Ayer cut is ever going to come to life, simply because the old Warner Brothers that set up the old DCEU and took it to, well, not really very much highs, but more lows than highs. That Warner Brothers regime is no longer here. You got David Zaslav and company in charge. David Zaslav and company, what they want to do is they want to save money. They don't want to like spend money just to spend money. And they don't see the value in spending tens of millions of dollars on a project that's going to drop on Max and not make any money for them, you know, because subscriptions alone is not a good return on their investment. Like they wouldn't have dropped $70 million to finish the Snyder Cut. The old Warner Brothers did, not this one. Warner Brothers Discovery is all about making that cash, not wasting it. So I do think that even if it's not a lot of visual effects things, even if they don't have to do any new photography like Zack Snyder had to do, there's still going to be a good amount of work that has to happen in order for, you know, the Ayer cut to become worthy of sharing to the world as a movie, you know, whether it's the soundtrack, because soundtracks are cut for the movie as it's, you know, put out in theaters. So if there's a different cut, scenes that have a different runtime, there's other scenes that were left on the floor, as Will Smith said, there was a lot left on the floor for the Suicide Squad that we did get to see, then, you know, you have to do a lot of work with sound, you have to do finishing work with color grading, with, you know, with sound design, as well as just, you know, a lot of those invisible VFX, you know, where you're wire work and you're just, you know, taking that stuff out. So, or, you know, like gunshot, like VFX, things of that nature, explosions. So, and even face replacements, you know, on stunt doubles, like that happens all the time now in Hollywood, especially superhero movies. You know, a lot of times you're like, oh my God, that is Scarlett Johansson swinging down the bridge in The Winter Soldier. No, it was actually a stunt double, and then they just replaced her face with Scarlett Johansson's face in post-production. But that's an extensive and very time-consuming and expensive process to do. So there's things like that which will have to happen in order for this movie to actually be a thing, unless they're okay with just saying, okay, well, here it is, with the unfinished pieces being the unfinished pieces, and it kind of plays like if they were, you know, like if you were watching those deleted scenes that you get on those Blu-rays as extras, and then they're just gonna say, oh yeah, just imagine that, you know, this previs version was a real thing. But usually they don't like insert it into the movie. In this case, you'd be watching a movie where everything looked finished and perfect, and then all of a sudden you're watching something that clearly you had wires, or like, oh, that's clearly a stunt double, or there's no music. What happened in the music is the audio looks a little rough. I can't really hear them properly. Did they not redub that? Like, what? All of those things would be missing. So I definitely think that this would be an additional expense. And I think it's also something, look, James Gunn has a lot of credibility as the head of DC Studios, but he hasn't really done a lot to be able to go to David Zaslav right now and say, hey man, give me a, you know, $20-30 million so that David Ayer can come back and finish work on his cut of a movie that we already released in theaters, made money on, and, you know, is well in the past for us as a studio. That's something that I think James Gunn would have more credibility and more pull off with his boss, as well as in general just being willing to put that kind of money behind a project like essentially a director's cut of a movie that came out years ago. He's going to have that after Superman Legacy, you know, succeeds. If Superman Legacy succeeds, after the DCU is a successful burgeoning universe, because then when they do the Ayer cut, it would just be like a cherry on top. It wouldn't be like, oh, at least we did the Ayer cut and that was fun, wasn't it? You don't want to compromise your new cinematic universe before it even begins. Like, because while the Snyder cut of the Zack Snyder's Justice League was a fantastic, you know, win for the fans, it also created even more of a divide amongst the fans, where people are looking at it and saying, hey, why did we not get all the movies that the Snyder Cut set up, despite the fact that there were no guarantees made that anything set up in the Snyder Cut was ever going to be followed up upon. So if you can imagine if Ayer Cut comes out, let's say in 2024, and it, you know, leaves a bunch of open plot threads hanging that will never be followed through on, all of a sudden the internet has something to hang on to and, you know, say, hey, this is not our Superman with Superman Legacy, which some people will already do that, fair. But instead, let's get back more Suicide Squad from David Ayer, and like where those characters go. Rick Flag's character is still alive, and the Suicide Squad is my Suicide Squad. The Suicide Squad is not my, like all of that stuff. Like, it's and you know what, James Gunn is smarter than that. So I do believe that while the Ayer cut might be a thing and may happen eventually, I just don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. It's not going to be something that will happen within the next couple of years at least. I mean, you know, like it may happen in the near distant future, and by that I mean, like, you know, it may happen in the next 4 or 5 years maybe, but it's probably not going to happen anytime like within the next year or two. And David Ayer can keep holding on to that and keep being that drum, and eventually it will probably happen because if the support stays there. But I just don't think it's going to be anytime soon. So let me know in the comments below what you guys think. Is the Ayer cut coming? Is it coming really, really soon? Or do you guys think it will never happen? Or like me, do you guys think it will happen, but it's just not going to be anytime soon? Just let me know in the comments below, and then, you know, of course, hit the like button if you like what you see here, and then subscribe. You know, that helps us, you know, keep doing more of what we're doing. All right, so now let's move on to another story here. We've got more Blue Beetle to talk about, so let's talk about that, right? So now Xolo Mariduena is playing Blue Beetle. He's playing the Jaime Reyes version of Blue Beetle, which is not the original Blue Beetle. He's sort of like the more reinvented new version of the Blue Beetle character that a lot of younger fans are, you know, really fell in love with, and so his character has a following. And he recently said something that I think a lot of people either didn't take notice of or perhaps are not giving enough credit to, but I certainly believe that there's a lot of credibility to his statement, especially if Blue Beetle does well. He said that he wants to keep playing the Blue Beetle for a long time. Like, in his own words, I want to do 12 more years, right? 12 more years, that's over a decade if you know your math well. So I look at his statement where he said this, and this wasn't, you know, promoting for the new Blue Beetle movie, and I see that as a legitimate possibility. And if this new Blue Beetle movie does a respectable amount at the box office, let's say it goes over 300 million, which for DC movies these days is respectable, or certainly exceeding expectations, especially for Blue Beetle, which there's not a lot of high expectations at the box office right now. But if it does that, then much like Hugh Jackman played Wolverine, and I guess you could say he still is because he's coming back for Deadpool 3, we could see, you know, someone like Xolo Mariduena playing a Blue Beetle character for the next 12 or so years. He's, you know, in the peak of his prime right now. He's a very young actor. He's still on the up and up. I said peak of his prime. I wouldn't really say he's the peak of his prime. I guess that depends on how the rest of his career goes, but he is certainly rising. He's a rising star, whether it's the show that he's got on Cobra Kai, which was YouTube before, and now it's on Netflix. So if you're a fan of that, which I believe that show's coming to an end, but still, you know, he's got that. He's got Blue Beetle now. He is somebody who is going to be around for quite some time to come. He is clearly very talented. I love the cast in this movie around him. You know, I love seeing George Lopez in anything. Susan Sarandon is, of course, always good to see her in any project, whether it's TV or movies. So I do fully believe that when he says he wants to play this character for another 12 years, not only is he serious, but I think that's actually very much a possibility. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Is this something that you believe will happen? Like, will he have a chance to play Blue Beetle for another decade? Because Blue Beetle is a character that fits him well now, but also could fit him really, really well in the future. So do let me know in the comments, what do you guys think? Recently, we got this news that the IATSE put out a statement saying, I think it was upwards of 50 Marvel VFX artists are now basically coming together to unionize. And so these Marvel VFX artists who put in hours and hours of work, being underpaid, overworked, sleeping at their desks, really, you know, putting together the VFX in some of the most highly anticipated, some of the most highest earning movies in Hollywood today, they have some terrible working conditions that they have to deal with. And now they are out there saying, hey man, this is it, that no longer are we going to do that. You know, the IATSE is a union that's been around for years and years and years, and they represent a lot of other craftsmen within Hollywood. You've got, you know, people from production coordinators to operators, sound editors, here, makeup, all of these people who are part of IATSE, they have protections because they have collective bargaining agreements in place, and that gives them the ability to be able to not only work a sane amount of hours but also get paid fairly for them, and not have to worry about things like where VFX artists get these changes that come in last minute from the directors and producers of these big movies, and then they're asked to turn those around basically overnight and say, hey, well, you're not going to get any more payment than what you already got. So you got to do this, because if you don't do it, then you're not going to get another project in the future. And that's just a terrible way to do any kind of job, no less visual effects job. I've done some rotoscoping work before for projects, and it is grueling. It is absolutely freaking grueling. Like, you sit there for 9 hours and you might have just gone through and rotoscoped what will on screen be like 3 seconds worth of footage. Like, it's insane how much hard work people put into it. Now, of course, there's a lot more than just things like rotoscoping. You're doing, other things like you're doing face replacements, you're doing wire removal, you're doing entire fully CGI, your particle systems, complete physics-based simulations. There's a lot that goes into VFX in movies today, especially Marvel movies, where there's entire studios dedicated to just the previs, that the stuff that you never get to see on screen, but the stuff that the directors and actors use as reference when they're filming the movie or before they go into production. And then later, all of that stuff, then other studios come in and turn that into actually usable content for the movie itself. But for all of those people, I think now, they're saying, look, no more, and then IATSE put out the statement, a super majority of Marvel's more than 50 worker crew had signed authorization cards indicating they wish to be represented by the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees. And I could not be happier to hear this. For more than half a century, workers in the visual effects industry have been denied the same protections and benefits their co-workers and crew members have relied upon since the beginning of the Hollywood film industry, said Mark Patch, who's the VFX organizer for IATSE, in the statement announcing that filing. And he said that this is a historic first step for VFX workers coming together with a collective voice demanding respect for the work we do. And respect is ultimately a big part of this, but also just sane, normal, or as normal as you can imagine, working conditions for people in the VFX industry. That's not just a good thing for Marvel. The reason I'm talking about this on DCU Daily is because this is a good thing for the industry as a whole. I mean, sure, maybe there's, studio executives out there looking at this thing, oh my God, way more money, we're not going to do this. Like, we can go hire some other studio that's not part of this new union or this new filing. And sure, there's a lot of studios out there doing work, but look, ultimately, I think the reason why this is significant is because this could be the start of something much, much bigger. Because in light of the actor strike and the writer strike, and the fact that both of those are going on together for the first time simultaneously since the 60s, it speaks a lot to the fact that conditions in Hollywood in general, like whether you're an actor, whether you're a writer, whether you're a VFX artist, conditions have been deteriorating for years. And for VFX artists, I think, are in a worse position than the actors or writers. So I think they deserve this more than anybody else. And I sincerely hope that, other VFX houses and VFX artists who aren't just working on Marvel projects, people who are working on DC projects, people who are working on Star Wars, people who are working on all the other movies, like every movie these days has some level of visual effects. Even a lot of the movies that you wouldn't think have visual effects have hidden visual effects, whether they're doing, cleanups in people's faces, de-aging or aging people up, or, removing things from a scene, whether it's, something on a piece of fabric or something in the background on a wall. There's a lot of small things that go into VFX today that people don't even notice. And, everybody in the VFX industry deserves the protections of a union, because clearly if there's no union in place, they will get exploited, because that's exactly what's been happening for decades now. And Marvel has been, probably the worst offender of this, because while they do build into their budgets, a whole plan and money for reshoots, they don't really build into their budgets the money needed for when the director asks for an entire sequence to be redone differently 2 weeks before the movie gets released in theaters. And all of a sudden, the VFX artists have to rush something together, and then people watch it and say, oh my God, the VFX are terrible. How is this movie $150 million of production and somehow we're getting terrible VFX? Well, it's because VFX artists, don't get enough time to finish their work. So not only at the end of the day, they did not get paid enough for the work, and they probably went through, bouts with depression, or they either decided to just leave the industry as a whole, or just have no hope for things getting better for them in the future. But also, when you look at their portfolio, they're like not able to show, oh yeah, that I did that scene in Marvel where that floating head thingy in Thor: Love and Thunder, that was my shot. Nobody wants to put that on the portfolio, nobody. But that's what happens when studios like Marvel, who have an outsized amount of power in the VFX industry and in Hollywood in general, they are able to basically exploit an part of the industry that is not unionized, where they don't have that protection. So I'm really glad that, these workers, these more than 50 workers, which is a small number, granted, but you have to start somewhere. And I really hope that a lot of these, people who work on Marvel movies, I'm sure they'll work on other projects too. And hopefully that, with them taking this first step, that's going to help us get to a point where other VFX artists from other studios and other VFX houses who work on whether it's DC projects or Star Wars projects or Jurassic World franchise or the Fast Furious franchise, any of the big movies or even the small ones, I hope they all can come on board and really make this take hold. And IATSE is one of the oldest unions in the game. So if IATSE is the one that's going to represent them, then they have the infrastructure in place to get things done. And that, I think, is going to be significant, because not only have we seen efforts like this take hold in the past, we've also seen them all pretty much fail miserably. And I think the reason why they all failed is because they never truly had that kind of backing. It was always some independent group kind of coming together. With IATSE, they're going to have a chance to really, make this stick and grow and be able to get a collective bargaining agreement with the studios. How long that takes to happen, I don't know, but you have to start somewhere, and I'm really glad that this is, finally a starting point. If it starts with the people who work at Marvel, great, but I think this could have a trickle-down effect to everybody across the VFX industry, and that could definitely affect DC movies as well. So let me know in the comments below what you guys think. Do you guys think this is a good thing for the industry as a whole? I certainly do think that it is, and maybe we can talk about this a little bit further in the future. Let's see if there's any more developments on this front, and if there are, then I'll most definitely, come back to you guys with more information about what's going on with VFX artists on more DCU Daily. Marvel and DC shows. What's the difference, you might ask? Well, there is a big difference, and let me explain. So recently, Secret Invasion finished its run. And Marvel shows, the ones today, the MCU Marvel shows, they're all designed to be a part of the MCU. The stories that are going on there are the same stories that you will see going on in the cinematic releases, the ones that you see in theaters. However, there's been a big problem with quality for the Disney Plus shows, because anything that goes in Disney Plus, it seems like it's very much hit or miss. It could either be as good as a Miss Marvel or WandaVision, or more likely it could be as underwhelming or as mediocre as She-Hulk Attorney at Law, which had a good start but then went downhill fast. Moon Knight, which could not stick the landing despite the fact that it did so well to set everything up in the first few episodes. And then Secret Invasion, which was just lazy writing in a lot of places, and then that finale was just like, oh my god, like these guys think they're writing some really adult themes and things that are very serious, but doing it with the least amount of nuance imaginable. Like, it was kind of just really bad taste what some of the scenes were toward the end of the last episode of Secret Invasion. So I, for one, I have a problem trusting the quality of Marvel shows, and it's ironic because in the poster of Secret Invasion they say, who do you trust? Well, right now, today, I don't trust Marvel to put together good TV shows on Disney Plus. I think a lot of people love the shows that Marvel did on Netflix, and so those Netflix Marvel shows in many ways I think were as good, if not superior. I mean, the budgets weren't as good, but they had, it was real TV. It felt like TV, whereas these shows on Disney Plus feel like movies that got drawn out into 6 episodes, and then you have filler episodes in a 6-episode series, and it just feels like you're getting ripped off. And the fact that they release them week to week, I think at this point, if this is going to be the quality, then people might as well, just wait until the season is done. However, here's some good news, right? Like we're talking about DC here usually, so let's talk about DC, right? DC shows. What about the shows that DC makes? Now, DC hasn't really had the kind of cohesive strategy behind their programming as Marvel has had in recent years. Even going back to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I think Marvel, tried to connect everything together as best as they could. However much they acknowledge that show, varies. Kevin Feige may or may not be a biggest fan of that. However, with DC programming of late, with something like Peacemaker, it tied directly into the Suicide Squad that James Gunn directed, and it was a show that I really did enjoy. I have not watched all the episodes. I think I skipped around a little bit then because I fell behind, but I will definitely go and watch it all the way through one more time before the next season comes out, because even just Eagly alone, or like just the fact that John Cena is willing to do pretty much anything to entertain an audience. That show was fantastic. The opening sequence to that show alone is worth the watch. And that's not only the only good example of a DC show. And certainly, even though this next one I'm going to talk about is not one that James Gunn is involved with, Doom Patrol is something that Greg Berlanti's team has put together. And Greg Berlanti, you might think, oh, the guy who did all those CW shows, so this must be terrible, right? Because like those CW shows weren't the greatest thing ever. Well, yes and no, because those CW shows were on their best day pretty good, but on their worst days really bad. But when it came down to a show like Doom Patrol, oh my. Like you guys have no idea how good this show is. If you haven't seen this on Max, go check this out. I believe it just aired its last season, and I haven't seen the last season, but oh my god, everything I've seen so far, Doom Patrol is one of the most underrated, one of the most underappreciated TV shows that DC has put together to date. And Greg Berlanti is going to be involved, I can guarantee you that, in the new DCU under James Gunn. Most definitely he will be, because he's got the chops to do things right, and Doom Patrol is a perfect example of that. And not only that, but now we're getting the Penguin that's going to be coming out on Max in 2024. It got delayed because of the strike and that to shut down production with actors and writers striking. But oh man, Colin Farrell was one of the absolute stars of the Batman, and his character, his accent, his look, everything about the Penguin was amazing in that movie. A very memorable character, and a character that with the portrayal that we got from Danny DeVito in the 80s and 90s movies, or I think it was 90s, Batman Returns, being so iconic that 2.5 decades later, to go back and be able to give us something that is so different and yet so iconic in its own right, I think you have to appreciate that. And if Matt Reeves' The Batman is anything to go by, and given how involved he is with this TV show as well, I'm excited for this. It's a miniseries like one of those Marvel shows, but I can guarantee you this may already be way better than any Marvel show to date, or maybe even in the future. And the fact that this will stay connected to the movie universe, I think is also really fantastic, because you're going to watch this show, you're going to be like, okay, and now when we pick up with the Penguin and the Batman Part 2, he would have, gone through the journey on this show. So your interest, your investment of time in this show is going to be rewarded in a way that it feels like a lot of the Marvel shows don't do, like, because other than maybe Secret Invasion, or even Secret Invasion, they may refer to some of the events, but I doubt that they're gonna be like, oh yes, something very specific that happened in Secret Invasion is gonna have a huge effect on a movie like the Marvels. Whereas with the show like The Penguin, I definitely think that's going to be the case. Like, this is going to play into the Batman movies. And then with Doom Patrol, I mean, that's a show that really was sort of its own pocket universe, so I don't believe that show is going to tie much into what we're going to see moving forward in the DCU, but it just speaks to the quality of production that DC can put together. And then when you look at Peacemaker, we know a season 2 is going to happen. James Gunn has said that as soon as he's done working on Superman Legacy, that he's going to go back and basically start working on Peacemaker season 2. So I am so excited for that. And then of course we're getting Waller, which is another spin-off from the Suicide Squad, with Viola Davis coming back as the iconic Amanda Waller character. And I'm sure there's going to be some Team Peacemaker characters in that show as well. So yeah, we know that Waller and Peacemaker season 2, and maybe even retroactively Peacemaker season 1 are going to be part of the new DCU, and it's going to be really exciting for me to see that, you know, when you watch those shows and you walk away from those shows, you can expect those shows to have an effect on the movies. You can expect all the storylines to connect in a way that feels very, very natural, and that to me is one of the most exciting things about the DC strategy now under James Gunn, because he has told us that everything, literally everything in the world of the DCU is going to be connected, from the animated to the live action to the TV to the movies to the games. And that's something that even Marvel, you know, has not really been able to do all that very well. Their TV show record at this point is very dodgy. Whereas when you look at the record that DC has got, DC certainly with the CW stuff aside, I think everything that DC is producing now, especially for like Max, it looks fantastic. So let me know what you guys think. Where do you guys land on this debate, Marvel versus DC shows? I personally think DC has a better track record, even though they probably have done fewer of those prestige level shows. The ones that they have done have been absolutely fantastic. And even if you're, you know, I haven't mentioned Titans because I don't think that's really at that level, but even Titans has definitely has its moments, and certainly is better than at least a couple Disney Plus shows from Marvel. So yeah, let me know in the comments below what you guys think. Of course, like and subscribe. We do appreciate that. This has been DCU Daily, and I'll see you on the next one.